on October the 23rd or the 25th here in Glendale, Arizona at the Glendale Civic Center for the most magical market on the land, the Witch Crafted Market. You can find me and all of my spiritual and medicinal tools on the 25th. So make sure that you guys go over to Witch Crafted here on Instagram and grab your tickets. They're only $5, and that $5 is going to give you a host of the most magical beings that you may be able to find here in Arizona. Okay? Peace, y'all. My name is Rumunera, and I am the owner and conjurer here at Conjure Works. Welcome back to my sanctuary.
It's impossible to get to human life without being hurt, without experiencing pain. That's just the nature of existence. But that's not what trauma is. Trauma is not hurt or pain. Trauma is a wound that hasn't healed. And yes, it's possible to get through childhood without being wounded. But in this culture, it's almost impossible. That's why the subtitle of my book is Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. Because I think this culture wounds people from even before birth onwards. Now, if you look at human history, prehistory, we evolved in small groups, very communal, very collaborative, very supportive, where the members were very secure that they belonged to the community. Children were surrounded by loving adults. So it's possible to grow up without trauma. It's not possible to grow up without pain, but not everything painful is traumatic. Everything traumatic is painful, but you can have pain without being traumatized by it, depending on the environment and the support that you get.
As a society, are we getting better or worse?
Oh, it's getting worse.
Is it?
On the one hand, there's more awareness, there's more methods, there's more science, but if you look at it from the point of view of human needs of either children or adults, it's getting more and more difficult. Children have the need for absolute security, which you didn't have, or safety, belonging in an attachment relationship. That's not negotiable. Oxygen is not negotiable. Security and safety for a child is not negotiable. It's a need. If we don't get it, we suffer. Children have a need to be able to experience all the emotions that nature gave them and to be able to express them and have those emotions validated and mirrored by the adults in a positive way. Adults adults or children, we all have a need to belong, to be connected with. That's our nature. Now, adults have a need for a sense of belonging. They have a need to be authentic, which means that they could be their true selves without having to follow and mold themselves according to the demands of their environment. And they have a need for meaning and purpose. Now, if you look at any of those needs that I've just outlined, this society is less and less capable of meeting them. Children are less and less safe and secure because the parents are more and more stressed. There's much less sense of belonging because communities, extended families have been eroded significantly. There's increasing isolation and loneliness. And in that context, no, it's getting worse. And your recent Surgeon General in the States here, Dr. Vivek Murthy, wrote a book about loneliness. And loneliness is an epidemic in the society. So is obesity. And all these, both of those are harmful to health. And that's just one example. Here in the United States, where we're speaking, 70% of adults are at least on one medication, and 40% are at least on two. This is in the wealthiest country in the world. This is a toxic culture.
But I
So we were never close. One of the examples that I can give to our dynamic is when we were younger. We had just got a fresh set of micros, and y'all know back in the day, when you just get those fresh set of micros, honey, you know how tight the scalp be. You know how tender the scalp be. And me and Slick had gotten into it about something. I can't even remember. We had gotten into it about something. And I remember like saying, I'm going to like run away or something. And I remember her grabbing me by my hair, like really like grabbing me by them freshly done micros and basically gripping me up. And I can't remember if she flung me across the room, or if she just pulled me into her. And I remember that situation ending, and I just see me running into the room and like to a bedroom and like starting to pack clothes. And I remember her like saying something to the degree of, where you going? You ain't got nowhere to go, or who wants you, or something like that. And I remember that moment because it was a stark difference in how she would discipline me versus how she would discipline my sister. I remember having a moment with a boy and ended up with a hickey. Again, very young. I think maybe we were in like 9th grade, and it was like my first boyfriend. And we didn't do anything, but you know, back in the day, you did a lot of kissing and you would end up with hickeys. And so that was the era of hickeys. And I remember getting a hickey and Slick taking me to school. Mind you, we was just starting the school, but Slick taking me to school and embarrassing me, like in front of all the teachers, you know, telling the teachers she can't be trusted, so she got to go with me. Like just things and ways like shame, like using shame as a form of discipline for me. And when I think back to how my sister Terror was disciplined, she never got hands put on her. She was never embarrassed in that way. She was never humiliated. It was more so her antics and the things that she did growing up garnered parental affection. Oh, look at her go. Like, there was never any consequences to her almost killing me by pushing me off the top of the bunk bed, and me injuring myself. There was never any consequences to her almost making me drink the stuff that you put in your cars to keep it cold during the summers. There was never any punishment for throwing all of my Barbie dolls out of the window when we were on our way to Florida one year. There were never any consequences for the treatment of her not being a sister when we were in school and just being one of my main bullies, and not even like kind of a bully. She was a fucking terror. And she was a terror in my adult life. I can now understand that she was a terror because she was fostered to be that. You know, there was never any correction. There was never any consequences to anything that she did. And I think it set the foundation for how we were raised. You know, the raising of our dynamics. I feel as though that I was parentified. I was heavily parentified. I was shamed for my emotions. I was shamed for being too sensitive. And there was a lot of the comparison games of, you know, between Slick, me, and Terror. You know, Slick wanting me to have tougher skin and to not be as weak and to be stronger, you know, just like, you know, the apple of her eye. And that just wasn't the case with me because I was such a sensitive child and I was carrying things that I realized now as an adult that I was carrying things that I was either too young to be carrying, or I was carrying things within my subconscious. My body was carrying things within it that I had forgotten and that I had, no memory of. And so I remember growing up, for prom, when we went on prom, and I remember telling Slick the only thing that I wanted for my prom dress was this denim. I wanted a full denim look. And nobody was really doing that at the time when we was going off to our senior prom. I just wanted a denim prom dress. And she refused to get it made for me. And her reason for not getting it made was it was too hot. Only for me to end up going to prom that year in a fucking wedding ball gown. Bitch, if that wasn't hot, I don't know what was. A bitch was dying underneath. Okay, I think I sat down for most of prom because a bitch was hot. A bitch was hot. Okay? But my sister Terror, she got exactly to the T what she wanted for her prom. For a soft hop, which was another dance for school. I remember going to one of them cheap stores back in the day. I think it was, I can't remember the name of it, but we used to go here all the time. But it was like one of them cheap stores to get a freaking pantsuit made. Went to go and get like a pinstripe pantsuit and these cheap little white shoes that I end up wearing to our soft hop dance. While Terror, again, was able to get this beautiful gown designed for her from scratch. And so for me, it has always been a situation of my dynamic relationship or parental dynamic with Slick was always bare minimum. Always bare minimum. And I think my godmother at the time, Nicetown, she saw that. And because she saw that, she fostered me differently. And so my godmother, Nicetown, was the one who helped me to understand my emotions and was the first one to help me understand that there wasn't anything wrong with me being an emotional child. There wasn't anything wrong with me being sensitive. And so she fostered me differently. She nurtured me differently. She took more time with me. And so for prom, she was the one that got me dressed while everybody else rallied around Tasha. I was at my godmom's house getting dressed. And so, and me saying I wore a ball gown was not to shade what I wore to prom. It was just to show the stark contrast of, Slick always ensuring that Terror had exactly what she wanted, exactly when she wanted it, and me always having to get the bare minimum, to not receive what I asked for, or to have somebody else do it, for me, because Slick doesn't want to be concerned with it. And so that is my familial relationship with Slick. She didn't like me. She didn't like me, and I feel like it was evident growing up. And I think that her preference being Tashelle was because she formed an intrinsic parental connection with Terror from birth. And I think that I was just a constant reminder to her of Colleen. And I think she wanted to erase her. I think she wanted to forget her existence. And I was always a reminder that you're never going to forget. You're never going to forget that these are not your children. And it wasn't that I wanted to be that reminder. I just think that that was what it was meant to be. I think that it was set in stone. And that was the dynamic. It was what it was. So yeah, that was our dynamic. That was our dynamic. Um, as I got older, our relationship, or just my relationship in general with my foster family, hasn't, I can be honest and say it hasn't been the closest. There was definitely another period of time before I completely went no contact, that I disappeared for a season of like 5 years, with very little contact to my foster family, and nobody checked on me. They knew where I was, but nobody called, nobody came, nobody checked in. And the responsibility of always having to hold the connection of relationship between me and my family became very, it became me. It became on me. It fell into my hands. And so because of that, those 5 years that I, basically disappeared, I was in a relationship and I just wasn't living where I was living anymore with my parents. I was living with my partner. But those 5 years, I think for me was the first time that I feel like I learned that these niggas don't care about me. These niggas don't care, and that relationship would end, with them being not present, not being around, going to family events during that 5 years of me disappearing, popping up at a few events and always being the butt of the joke, becomes exhausting. Because that's what I was, the butt of the joke. And after a while, jokes stopped being jokes and shit stopped being funny when you've heard it like all your life. Like, it's like, at what point do I stop becoming the butt of the joke? And I feel like that made it very, like, growing up in that environment made it very difficult for me to be able to gauge people and to be able to gauge how people like me, and if they don't like me, and if they fuck with me, or if they don't fuck with me. Like, it makes, in my adult years, it makes it very difficult for me to be able to read when people don't like me, because growing up, jokes were used and shame was used as a way to show me love and to foster love with me. And that wasn't love. Mean, consistent jokes that are always mean and unnecessary, at the while stop being jokes, and it just becomes harmful, and it becomes harmful bullying, that weighs on a child, whether the child wants it to or not. It sticks with them. And so my relationship dynamic with my family has always been like, with me feeling like the eyeball out, like I just never belonging, like, anywhere. And that set up my never feeling like I belonged anywhere moving through life. And so what I would go on to learn, coming into back into relationship with my biological family, and now hearing a lot of the stories, and a lot of the things that took place around our being adopted, it just made a lot of things make sense. Like, us spending that year apart, Tara being with Slick and me being with Colleen, I think solidified who was whose mother. I think spiritually, Slick was definitely Tara's mother, and I think Colleen was just a portal to get her here. And I think that I was my mother's child. And if you can imagine growing up around a familial unit that doesn't prefer you, but you're here, you'll never understand my side of you'll never understand where I'm coming from and how I feel until you've been there. And an example of that is when we went back to Willow Grove for my grandmother Aurelia's funeral. I can remember everybody remembering and knowing who I was, but nobody really knowing who Terror was. And I can remember how that hurt her feelings. Like, I can remember, I don't remember if we had a conversation about it, like she and I, or if she was having the conversation or we were having the conversation with somebody else and her feelings came up. But I can remember her feeling bad about going back to a family that we know is ours, but nobody not knowing who you are, or not necessarily being as excited to see you as they were excited to see me. And I can imagine, I know what she feels like, or what she felt like in that moment during our biological grandmother's funeral, because I lived it with our foster family. Like, I lived that life. And us being separated for that first year solidified me as being the other. You know, I was already wearing the stain of Colleen and of her addiction and of who she was as a person. I was already wearing her stain. And so by the time, you know, my mother, who eventually, when she decided to leave Terror with Slick and to take me with her, you know, she was in a battle with her biological mother, my grandmother Aurelia. And mind you, addiction is my bloodline. Like, that's my bloodline. So my mother carries a lot of trauma from her mother, who was an alcoholic. And at that time, my grandmother was an alcoholic. And my mother was in the bowels of her addiction at the same time. And so, you know, my grandmother stood on the side of, I'm not letting nobody take my granddaughters. And my mother was on the other end of, I'm not entrusting an alcoholic to take care of my girls. I can't trust you to do and to not fuck them up the way that you fucked me up. And as a grown woman, now dealing with the consequences of my upbringing, I can understand, you know, my mother's disposition. And at that time, my mother had to make a decision, and the decision that she made during that time was to take me with her back to Willow Grove and to leave Terror there with Slick and Coolio. And my grandmother would end up taking Slick and Coolio to court for custody, which she would then back off from, because she was also an addict. She was also an alcoholic. And so the people around her convinced her that that was not a fight that they felt like she could win. And she backed off. And there was a point in Slick coming to get me that my Nana Caddy and my godmom Sheila would go on the run with me, because they didn't want to give me back, because they didn't feel like they should have given me back, and so they went on a run with me. And so for me, it is finding out this whole other side and idea that there were people that fought for me and that fought to keep me, and also the parallels of growing up with the Sheila and growing up with a Sheila that did not necessarily like me or want me, but also in another parallel reality, having a godmother named Sheila that loved me to death, that loved me like I was her own, because I was her own. I was her Zudio girl. And so, you know, as I assess and look back over my life, just as much as I see the ills that played out, I can also see the bigger picture of everything as well. And I'm able to also understand why things played out the way that they played out. And we're going to continue to get into how things and why things played out the way that they played out. Now, I don't only want to leave y'all with my trauma, with the trauma that I experienced, and I also don't want to inspire you to dig up your own trauma, without giving you some tools that you'll be able to use as you journey through this season of your life, because these tools are helping me to journey or to wade differently in my own waters as I tread them. And so I want to share them with you. One of the things that I want to give you guys is a way that you guys can identify what is termed as CPTSD, which is childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of the ways that you'll be able to identify if you are dealing with childhood PTSD, as I am learning that I am also dealing with childhood CPTSD. And so I have some notes that I want to give you guys really quickly, and because I don't want to hold you any longer. As you guys know, I'm long-winded, but let's get into this really quickly. Some of the ways that you will see suppression occur in children who are experiencing CTPSD. One of the ways is expressing emotions, or feeling like expressing your emotions felt unsafe, or vulnerability, or your vulnerability was punished or ignored. Okay, so if you feel like growing up as a child or being adult now, you have trouble expressing your emotions, or feeling like your emotions are ignored, or the things that are important to you are ignored, is oftentimes a symptom of your emotions being suppressed as a child. Okay, another way that you can see this show up, or that we see suppression happening between a parent and a child, is the suppression. Suppression prevents overwhelming or distressing flashbacks or relational conflict. And I see this show up and within my own foster family, with sweeping things under the rug, not having the hard conversations about adoption, not having the hard conversations about our family. And if conversations did come up concerning any of those things, our foster mother, Slick, having a very emotional, outright temper tantrum, because these things are being talked about. So never having space to actually deal or talk about these things because everything is being suppressed, because the person that's having to deal is feeling overwhelmed, or they would just rather dismiss relational conflicts. Another way that we can see suppression show up in children is the reinforcing of chronic emptiness, being hyper arousal, or being avoidant. Okay, some common patterns that we see show up is emotional numbing or disassociation. I know for myself, growing up, especially as I was going through school, I used to truly believe that I had a superpower of being able to fast forward through my life really, really quickly, like especially parts that were like icky or were very painful. I had the ability to be able to fast forward through them really quickly. In my adult years, I have learned that that was actually me disassociating, okay, or emotionally numbing myself to be able to get through whatever it was that was happening to me. Another common pattern that we see show up as it relates to suppression is people pleasing, chronic hypervigilance, or eternal shame. What I was sharing with you guys earlier about, seasons where I felt cringy about myself, or cringy, weird about things about my personality or characteristics about myself. That was internal shame, eternal rhetoric that I picked up from other people that didn't belong to me. Those were projections from other people and things that they felt about me. Okay. Some cognitive effects of suppression and how they show up is rumination, constantly replaying past or traumatic mistakes or events, difficulty focusing or making decisions, emotional flooding after or suppression or suppressional breakdowns like withdrawing suddenly or altogether. Okay. Also, trouble identifying and labeling your emotions. You deal with self-reinforcement or self-criticism and heavy shame. Also, suppression perpetuates hypervigilance and mental exhaustion. Okay, some of the ways that suppression can show up in your body as physical effects: chronic muscle tension, neck, shoulder or jaw tension or pain, a dysregulated nervous system. You can also experience sleep disruptions like insomnia, or fragmented sleeping, or nightmares. All of those I have experienced. There was actually, I still actually do it. I've been trying to wean myself, but all throughout my life, I always had to sleep with like a nightlight or sounds playing, like the TV or music playing, and that is a symptom of childhood PTSD. Another physical element that you can experience when you are an adult dealing with childhood TPSD is elevated cortisol levels. So a strain on your immune system, a higher probability of chronic illnesses or autoimmune diseases. Okay, and that's another reason why I'm consciously making the decision to deal with my shit and to learn the shit that I didn't know and to uproot every lie and to find out every truth, even if it hurts, so that I don't make myself sick keeping lies for other people, so that I don't make myself sick holding onto stories that were never real. So the journey of doing the work is deeper than finding out family tea or family drama. It's ensuring that you don't make yourself sick trying to evade or to cover the sickness of the people around you. Okay? Relational effects: when you have dealt with suppression from childhood trauma, difficulty expressing your needs, dealing with being misunderstood, or being misunderstood with distance or resentment. Avoidance of intimacy or control around intimacy, people pleasing or codependency, a reduce in trust and a fear of vulnerability. Suppression creates a vicious cycle of preventing safe emotional connections. All these things I'm dealing with as an adult. Hello. And the last thing that I want to give you guys is a way and steps you can take to begin recovery and healing from childhood trauma. Awareness is one of your number one tools that you have access to. Awareness, calling a thing what it is, taking off your rose-colored glasses and really looking at what's in front of you and not looking at it for what you desire it to be, but for what it truly is at the root. Okay. So being able to notice patterns of suppression without judgment. Okay. You can also practice somatic practices like grounding, trauma counseling or therapy, yoga, or doing body scanning. Body scanning is simply sitting with yourself and figuring out what is your body energetically and physically trying to tell you. Okay. And safe expression. Okay. So finding a way to safely talk about and to release the things that you need to say from this throat chakra. Okay. So whether it be through art, dance, acting, or just getting on here and having a video journal like I am for this month, for Hoodoo Heritage Month. You can also go to the gym, take on running, but if nothing else, definitely get into some type of therapy, whether it's a trauma-informed therapy, something that's more like somatic practices like EMDR, and a daily habit that you can pick up that will help you to begin healing this trauma is your daily habits, naming and validating the things that you are feeling, calling it what it is, and holding a safe space for your body to move through those emotions, okay, and those feelings. And so I'm going to let you go here, and I'm going to thank you again for joining me for episode 13 of Hoodoo Heritage Month. I wish you all a happy journey of identifying yourself And until next time, y'all, peace.
The pain of not being yourself is too much. So how do you get back to yourself? Well, the good news is that the self that you abandoned all those years ago, not deliberately, not consciously, and it was never your fault. But what happens is that that self that you disconnected from, which is the essence of trauma, is the disconnection from yourself. That never went away. It's still there. And it's talking to you. And it's talking to you through your body. And it's talking to you through your emotions. So it's a matter of learning how to pay attention. And at some point, you have a decision to make. As a child, I had no choice. When there was a conflict between attachment here, authenticity over here, I had to choose. I didn't even choose because it's not conscious. I had to go with the attachment. As an adult, I don't have to anymore. And yes, if I'm authentic, I may lose some of my attachments. Some people who really liked me before will not like me. So you lose the attachment. And you have a decision to make. What would you rather have? Who would you rather have in your life? Them or yourself? That's a decision you're going to have to make sometime.
On October the 23rd, or the 25th, here in Glendale, Arizona, at the Glendale Civic Center, for the most magical market on the land, the Witch Crafted Market. You can find me and all of my spiritual and medicinal tools on the 25th. So make sure that you guys go over to Witch Crafted here on Instagram and grab your tickets. They're only $5, and that $5 is going to give you a host of the most magical beings that you may be able to find here in Arizona. Okay?